8:10 on Friday. We're always interested to know just how healthy our West Michigan economy is doing. And Dr. Brian Long is the Director of Supply Chain Management Research at Grand Valley State University, and he does keep his eye on all of these things and related matters as well. And he's back with us this morning. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning to you, too.
Well, we appreciate your time today. So let's just talk generally for a second. Your latest report shows us just booming and booming, right?
Well, I'm afraid we have slowed a little bit. Our statistics are still positive, but we're much slower than we were, say, just 6 months ago.
Really? What's accounting for that?
Well, several factors, the biggest of which is, of course, the whole world economy has slowed down, and that has been reflected in the U.S. economy. We're actually doing better than the rest of the nation right now here in southwest Michigan because the national economy has turned virtually flat as far as the industrial market is concerned, and that's, of course, the market that I survey regularly.
Right. So what makes us look so good or better?
Well, we've got a lot of things going for us right now, largely that the west side of the state of Michigan is quite a lot more productive than the east side of the state. We just have to say that we're doing it right, I guess, in West Michigan, but it has to do with the total cost of doing business. The total cost of doing business with some of our companies here are, what should I say, our costs are world competitive. We've got many companies, particularly in the automotive field, that can compete with any company in the whole world.
Interesting. So was this expected? Is there something cyclical about this, or that has to do with the timing at this time of year that makes this happen, or was it not expected?
Not particularly expected because, once again, we are relegated more and more to the world economy, even here in West Michigan. We, of course, have seen the world economy have trouble in particular places, particularly Western Europe, that has been slowing. Fortunately, in just the last month or so, the European economy has shown that it's still going to be just slightly positive. And, of course, we always hear about China, our third biggest customer as far as the world is concerned. China is the world's second largest economy, according to some. Others will take it back and say, if you compare it on the basis of constant dollars or on the basis of earning power, the Chinese economy is actually bigger. But the Chinese economy, the rate of the growth of the Chinese economy has slowed to a crawl, and the industrial end of the Chinese economy has actually turned negative.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, we'll talk more in a moment about what that might mean when we come right back with Dr. Brian Long, Richard Piet Show Friday, WBCK. WBCK Friday, Richard Piet Show. We're talking with Dr. Brian Long. Of course, another quarterly report on the economy and other observations. And so the news so far, Brian, hasn't been so great. We've slowed down quite a bit. And when you look globally, you're seeing the same sort of factors. Was there anything that was particularly at the root of that?
Not really at the root, but I guess there have been some overall problems. One of them, of course, relates to finances as far as the world is concerned. We have a lot of baby boomers starting to retire right now, and they are, of course, looking for their retirement benefits. In Western Europe, of course, they put together a very good Social Security package for all intents and purposes that's quite a lot larger than ours. And the same thing is true with the rest of the world where, again, the baby boomers are experienced people, are leaving the labor force, and yet the pension funds that were set aside for them have not been properly funded. So we're struggling with that almost at every level in government around the world.
That's a little scary.
Indeed it is, and that's part of the reason that things are slower until we can sort this whole thing out and get these things properly financed, which is certainly doable, but we have to begin doing it, too.
So I'm trying to extrapolate from what you've said. So those folks are or are not retiring because of that, and if they are, they're just not spending their money?
partially true. They aren't spending their money as fast, and for that reason, the economy has slowed some. But it's more of a case of fear within the municipalities, the states, the governmental units of, gee, we haven't put aside enough money. How are we going to fund this? Mm-hmm. And this, in turn, reflects back on their finances, which, in turn, reflects back on the world financial situation, saying this is a major factor that the world has to figure out right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what about the tea leaves for the first quarter of next year? Is there anything you've been able to discern from that that might show us a ray of hope or not?
We should be stable going into the upcoming year because our key industries on the west side of the state of Michigan are, first of all, automotive. And until automotive sales slow, we're going to keep going at a very good rate among our auto parts manufacturers. Locally, Denso, Tokarica, Lear Siegler, all of these are going to continue to do well. Secondly, the office furniture business, 14% of the world's office furniture is made right here in West Michigan. That industry is still at or near its peak. There's no sign of that slowing down. And, of course, the other major industry that we have in the area is aerospace. And with Boeing and Airbus and all the major manufacturers still at record levels, we have to believe that our parts suppliers there are going to continue to do well. Therefore, we are going to be at least stable going into the first part of 2016.
It's interesting when you think about office furniture, which you've mentioned. When you think about that, how often do companies replace office furniture? And more than that, how often do they buy new office furniture? We presume that when an office furniture company sells new furniture, they may not see that customer again for a long time.
Well, that is very much the truth with new construction, and that's why we keep an eye on new office construction and new office openings, because generally with a brand new office, they tend to put brand new furniture in.
Right.
Now, the other place is, of course, the replacement furniture, and the companies have been so overflowing with cash in the last few years that they've held back, saying we don't want to invest, and the people come to them and say, you've been promising us new office furniture for 15 years now. How about opening up the wallet? And that has been a thing that has boosted the sale of office furniture as well.
Have you been around in this building listening to us?
Oh, gee, yeah.
Sounds like us around here. All right. We're talking with Dr. Brian Long. In a minute, we'll talk about wage stagnation. He's given some things to think about as it relates to that, and some folks are sort of laughing and saying, what wage stagnation? Yeah, it's out there, right? WBCK Friday, Dr. Brian Long, observer of the West Michigan economy, among other economies, is with us. And you do have a tendency to observe other things like wages and whether or not those are changing. When I went into the workforce 30 years ago now, it was pretty regular to get a raise, even if it was just a little one. But it seems like the last 10 years or so, that just doesn't happen, does it?
Well, that was partly tied to inflation at the time.
Right.
And, of course, we were in an era of just about constant inflation. We expected 3% or so every year, and the economists, of course, prefer to see inflation at about 2%. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that does seem to stimulate growth. If there's some mild inflation, it encourages people to buy rather than wait for the future. But that's what the companies were trying to keep up with at that time, is to say, we've got to give you a little bit more just to retain you.
But do they do that now?
Unfortunately, not as much. We have gotten into this thing called the Great Recession, and wages were frozen. There's some people that still have their wages frozen at where they were at the beginning of the recession. Now, there's a number of things that go into that. Part of it is just the way that budgets are put together these days, and there's not the money there for additional wages like there used to be. They build it into a number, they plug it into the computer, and some department manager wants to retain somebody when they go to HR and say, hey, can you give us some more money so we can keep this person? And they just come back with the old traditional thing of, well, that's not in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So a few are starting to give marginal increases now. And part of the excuse for that, of course, relates to the fact that inflation really for the last 6 years has been very low, and that the increases weren't necessary to retain people.
It is interesting, though, that you say that, because couldn't we presume, and this sounds like a conspiracy theory or something, but if the employers all got together and said, let's just not give raises anymore, that they could band together and make that work?
To a certain extent, I don't want to say they have, but the resources that they use to gauge wages, again, there's a whole bunch of online resources right now for HR that says, here is the going rate for this particular job. And, of course, management at all levels refers to these same numbers. And, again, it isn't the companies banding together, but it's these resources that are out there that say, this is what you ought to be paying for this particular job, and if you're paying more than that, you're paying too much.
Wow.
And they, in turn, plug that into the computer that becomes, again, part of that massive budget.
But even if times are good, I mean, for the last several years, the presumption was, things are just not going as well, sales are down, et cetera, and so we're not giving raises. But I'm getting the notion that even companies that are banking money because their profits are better still don't want to give wage increases.
They don't, and in part this relates to a phenomena in the market itself. We didn't notice it in previous recessions, but generally wages have not started to move until we get back near full employment. Now, the thing I hate about economists when they declare the end of the recession, what they really declare is the bottom of the recession. We still have to dig ourselves out of the hole. Now, previous recessions, going all the way back to 1950, we were out of the hole in about 24 months or so. And during that time, there wasn't much in the way of wage increases. But within, again, 2 years or so, wages were starting to creep up again. Well, we're just approaching those numbers right now that we consider to be full employment as far as West Michigan. The sign that this is happening, look everywhere, and you're going to see help wanted signs. It's in fast food. I've driven past at least 3 companies that had signs out in their yard. We're hiring. We need people. This is the point in time that wages start to creep up. Now, it's going to be slow because the recovery from this recession has been slow.
Right.
But we should see improvement really over the next year, assuming, once again, nothing shakes us too far from our current glide path of slow growth.
So if the economists say the recession is over and that's really the bottom and we're on our way back up, where are we now as best you can tell?
Well, as far as I can tell, we're approaching that point of full employment. And at full employment, that's where I tend to declare that the real recession has ended. And we look at the West Michigan numbers, and we see counties like Calhoun County that's at 4.2% unemployment. Well, we were at 5.6% unemployment just a year ago.
Wow. But
Calhoun County was at 12.8% in August of 2009.
Wow.
So a huge amount of improvement. Still room to go, of course, but we're to that point now that we're starting to press the labor market and saying we need more people, and the only way we're going to get more people is to start and offer some kind of a premium. And that's the next signs that you're going to see, that we're not only looking for people, but we're willing to pay some kind of a premium.
Pay more, yeah. Well, if there's a ray of light we could end on, I guess that was it.
Indeed. I believe we still look good going into the upcoming year, but beyond that, we have to watch what's going on in the rest of the world.
All right. Well, we appreciate it as always. Dr. Brian Long with a viewpoint on the West Michigan economy. Thank you.